What bold, intimate experience are you most ashamed of? Years ago, I don't remember exactly when, but I was already a pro at performing my flute solo. We had this video camera in the house, and I wanted to see what I looked like while doing it. Yeah, I could have just stood in front of the bathroom mirror or something, but that's not how I do it. I do it sitting or lying down, so I thought, why don't I just hold the video camera up, flip the screen around, and see what I look like while doing it? After I was done recording, I went to put down the camera, and I heard a beep. My finger accidentally hit record when I was holding the camera. So I rewind the tape, and I found that I now have a few minutes of my solo performance recorded over top of a family vacation video. Obviously, luckily, I was home alone at the time, so even though I was freaking out, I had time to try to figure out what to do. In retrospect, I probably could have destroyed or thrown away the tape and just denied it vehemently, but I am a terrible liar and didn't know what to do. So my first thought was to go outside and record something, anything, just to cover it up. I'd rather explain nonsense than what I just did. So I took the camera outside, and I just started walking around the house yard, recording and talking about the house. This is the backyard. Down here, we have the garden. These are tomatoes. These are green beans, etc. Then all of a sudden, I saw my dad's car pull up, so I hurry up and come back inside, put the tape in my pocket, and without being noticed, put the camera back where it belongs. For whatever freaking reason, about 20 minutes later, he goes, "I'm bored. Let's watch the tape from vacation." I said I didn't want to, so I went upstairs and started having a mini heart attack. I hear him digging around by the camera, and he asks me if I know where the tape is, and I say, no. I don't know if he could hear it in my voice or what, but he asked me again because I was the only one home, and by this point, I was freaking out, and anyone could tell I was hiding something. So after some serious interrogating, I admit that I took it, and that I did something with it, and that I was ashamed at myself or something. So he takes it, and I leave the room, and all I hear is vacation chatter, followed by the silence that can only be my little performance from before, followed abruptly by, "These are tomatoes. This is where the green beans are," followed by dead silence. I guess I didn't rewind far enough when trying to cover my tracks. I'm surprised I didn't have a heart attack. He called me downstairs and just gave it back to me and said I need to film more stuff outside. We never spoke of it again. That was the last time I touched the video camera. Story 2. My girlfriend and I were a little drunk, so while we were in the shower, my drunk mind decides that tonight we'll have some fun in her backyard. My mouth was dry because of various reasons, so my drunken logic was that since the conditioner works wonders to make my hair smooth and all, it would work just fine for it. So I grabbed and used the pink bottle of herbal essences and conditioner. The day after, we had a family gathering at my mom's place for Easter. All of us were chatting and enjoying the company of one another. Until, out of nowhere, a strong smell of flowers reaches my mom's nose. So she starts asking the rest of my family if they can smell it too. She was walking in a circle around the table, the origin of that random smell. This is when I understood where it was coming from. I leaned to my girl and whispered in her ear, trying not to burst into laughter. "Did you fart?" Her face turned from her normal pale tone to bright red in seconds. Boy, was she embarrassed. My mom was still trying to find where the smell was coming from without success. She looked at my girl and asked, "Is this your perfume?" She answers that it isn't with her trembling voice and just becomes silent right after, staring at her plate. I noticed her lips moving. So, again, I leaned in, and she whispered she needed to let another one rip. By that time, my mom sat back at her place, close to ours. A couple of minutes later, the room starts, yet again, to smell delightful. Again, my mom was trying to find what smelled so good, and again, my girlfriend's face was turning red. In a super awkward way, my girlfriend stood up and told my mom she needed to go outside to smoke. No one but my girlfriend and I knew what really smelled like flowers. Story 3. Back in the day, I had no game. Still don't, but that's another story. I don't know how, but I managed to pick up a girl from a club. We went back to her place and got it going on. I was in that state of drunk where you're not too wasted to do the deed. The room was so dark you could barely see anything. I was thinking, this is going great. I looked over and saw her with her arms above her head, holding onto the headboard, and I saw a figure standing. For a split second, everything froze as my brain tried to process what was happening. Then, panic. I shot up like a jack-in-the-box, lost my balance, and went straight down between the nightstand and the wall. Now I'm lying there, dazed, staring up at this shadowy figure, now at the edge of the bed. It leans down, looks at me, and says in the calmest voice imaginable, "Ah, this always happens." The aftermath was awkward as heck because I had no idea what to do. So I just grabbed my stuff and got out of there. In hindsight, that was probably my only chance ever to have a 3 score. Till this day, I sometimes think back to it and say to myself, how freaking stupid were you for leaving like that? Story 4. When I was 18, I was dating this very nice girl, I'll call her Linz, who had awesome parents. They were so friendly towards me and thought the world of me. We had a routine where I would drive her home and we'd fool around in my car out in front of her house. She lived on a pretty quiet street, so there were very rarely any traffic and no streetlights. After months of us beating around the bush, she finally asked if I wanted a blowy. Awesome. I was finally getting the favor returned in the front seat of my car when I heard a tapping on my window. It was her father. What happened next was the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me and still left me confused 9 years later. As I looked at him through my car window with sheer terror in my eyes, he politely said, "Oh, hello, kid. Could you please tell Linz to turn off the porch light when she's done?" Then walked back into the house. I know what was going through my mind, but what was going through Linz's head? I don't know if she was too embarrassed to lift her head up or she just didn't give a crap, but she never broke stride. Now, the right thing to do would be to cut my losses and get out of there. But I was finally getting a blowy, and I'm ashamed to say that I let push me to the finish line. As I was driving home, I was trying to convince myself that maybe her father didn't see anything. Nope. There was no way he didn't see it. The weirdest part of it all was the fact that neither he nor Linz ever spoke of this to me. It was like it never happened. I eventually cracked under the pressure and broke up with the girl a few months later. I have no idea if she went and turned out the light when she went inside. Call me crazy, but that was the last thing I was worried about. Also, I'm not saying I wanted to have a full-on conversation with the guy. That would be weird. I just wanted some acknowledgement of the whole thing. A head nod. A simple, "Let's forget about last night." If he was playing the slow burn, he's a genius. It's 9 years later, and I'm still talking about it. He's won the war. Finally, as nice a girl as she was, we were only 18. Would I still be with her today? I don't know. I doubt it. All I know is I'm happily engaged to an amazing woman now, and that's all I care about. Story 5. Years ago, I have no idea anymore why, I thought it might be a nice change of pace to try doing it upside down while in the shower. Not to hit it in the face, but to just have a new experience. So there I was, in the stand-up shower, with my head and neck on the floor and the rest of my body vertical against the corner of the shower. The shower door was clear glass, and I was lathered up doing my thing when my mother walked in. We haven't said a word to each other about that ever. But I will never forget the shame I felt afterwards. Although it still didn't stop me from doing something similar in a few days, just making sure everything was locked down. I think she thought it was my dad. It was an old house and only had one full bathroom. We even had to put the shower in ourselves. Before that, it was just an old claw-style tub. Story 6. I would often sneak into my then-girlfriend's room through the window that opened to her backyard. Her bed was positioned directly beneath the window. One night, I snuck in and left the window open. We did our work and fell asleep in her bed. I woke up at 4 in the morning to her dad yelling, "What the heck?" I panicked and didn't have time to think. My first instinct was to jump back out the window and run. What I didn't realize was that, while I was asleep, my girlfriend had woken up and closed the window. I ended up crashing through the glass, getting a few cuts and shards stuck in my feet, but thankfully, nowhere else. I got away, but my girlfriend texted me the next day and told me to come over and talk to her dad. When I did, he said he wasn't mad, but added, "You smashed my window and my daughter. You owe me." Most of the reason he was so calm about it was that our families had been friendly for a few years, and once he realized it was me, he cooled off. Our dads even joked openly about what would have happened if they'd ever caught us together. Story 7. To start off, I am a 22-year-old white male. During spring break this year, I was having fun having a lot of drinks. A buddy of mine told me that he would give me $10 if I did it with this girl. I knew she was pretty into me, but just reminded me of the Pillsbury Doughboy. It was a pretty easy $10. Anyway, the next day comes around. The same friend tells me that for every random girl I do it with at the bar that night, he would give me another $10. Somebody else added 20 to that deal, so $30 to get some. Game on. We end up at the bar, and once again, I'm pretty drunk and have two leads. The first is a girl from a bachelorette party, drop-dead gorgeous. The other is an older woman from a group ranging in age from 36 to 58, as I'd later find out. This is where I was a jerk. I had a sure thing with the older woman, since the two were actually arguing over which one got to go with me. But the younger one was so stunning, I would have let her eat crackers in my bed. My mind started to chime in. Don't screw this up. Go for the $30. I argued with myself for a bit before finding out the older woman had a hot tub. So, yeah, I went home with a 40-year-old. She was fine, though it got a little awkward talking about her 17-year-old son. Oh, and she was also a cop. So now I can literally say I screwed the police. Congrats to me for throwing away my standards and morals for $40. Story 8. I was dating this guy for a while, and to be honest, he was a bit strange. He didn't have many friends, and I could tell there was something off about him. His family was just as odd. We'd been together for about 4 months when he told me he had a secret to share. I had no idea what to expect. Maybe some weird family drama. But instead, he blurts out that he wants to do something and wants me to guess what it is. I start listing off the usual things, but none of them are right. Finally, he explains that he loves seeing food thrown at people or into their clothes. I was completely shocked. I left his house that night, trying to process what I'd just heard. After thinking it over, I told myself, well, I like this guy. Maybe it's not that bad. We didn't really talk much about what happened afterward. He was clearly embarrassed. But a month or so later, he started dropping hints about wanting to try it. At first, I thought he was joking, but when I realized he was serious, I started feeling really uncomfortable. For reasons I still don't fully understand, I went along with it once, and it turned out to be one of the most awkward and uncomfortable experiences of my life. It has to be my biggest regret. Even going out with this guy was such a big mistake. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay with him. I broke up with the guy a few months after. I just couldn't handle it anymore. Story 9. When I was younger, I made poor, impulsive decisions and my self-confidence was in the toilet. I would do anything for attention from men. I had recently moved and was completely cut off from my family and friends. Before long, I was spending the night with pretty much anyone who would have me. Once, I went to a large hotel party. I fooled around with a guy I actually found repulsive and then left the room, only to be picked up immediately by a man 20 years older. He told me I needed to take a shower first, and I did. At the time, we lived in dorms that were segregated by gender. One night, a guy snuck over and kept pushing me to spend time with him in the back room. Several of the girls in my room saw it happen. I told him to F off, but he kept begging, and eventually I gave in. The other girls just rolled their eyes. By then, I already had a reputation. I genuinely had no idea how to say no when I was younger. After I returned to my home state, I got the idea to start S-working. For some reason, that gave me the power to say no in situations I would have gone along with just a year earlier. My professional boundaries were set in stone, and I never crossed them. The idea of a safe word gave me power over the guy for the first time. A few months into it, I met a man who was just curious. He was so nervous about meeting me that we talked through email for 3 or 4 weeks before I ever came by. He tells me now that the first time he saw me, he knew he was going to marry me. We've been together for 6 years now, have a lovely relationship, and are getting married in a few months. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. And I don't doubt that if I hadn't met him, I'd still be doing weird stuff with strangers for cash. Story 10. I was with my first boyfriend at the time, and he was inspecting my backyard. I'd never had anyone do that before, and overall it was pretty pleasant. But as he continued, I started to feel a certain rumble in my stomach. The warning sign of one of those massive, oh, God, not here, not now, why me? Farts. Regular farts don't have the same effect. Only the monsters feel the need to announce their presence. I tried to push him away and do something else, but he was having a bit too much fun. The rumble turns into an audible growl. I'm honestly curious as to whether he couldn't hear it or if he just ignored it. Then I proceeded to let out this loud, ungodly fart. I actually felt my bottom vibrating from the force. Needless to say, everything came to a screeching halt, and we proceeded to go to sleep facing away from each other. I was so embarrassed that I left at the crack of dawn the next morning. Story 11. I did it to a toaster one time. There was just something about it that mesmerized me one day. And then, in my odd hypnotic trance, I put one hand over the heat while doing my thing, and I finished it with a piece of toast. Then, I spread butter and strawberry jelly on another slice of toast, put it together, and then ate a load butter and jelly sandwich. I am only ashamed because afterwards I noticed my cat was watching me the whole time, and he had a look of utter disbelief mixed with a stern disapproval. Our eyes met, and he slowly turned his head, walking off as if to say, "I'm done with this crap." I'm so sorry, Smushy. I would like to point out that I did not name the cat. My ex did. The cat had a flat face, so it was named Smushy. Smushy no longer resides with me, so I may never know if I am still despised or not. Story 12. We were both new to relationships, and she's a year older than me. We'd been dating for a couple of years. One night, I snuck over to her place through the window. The door squeaked like fingernails on a chalkboard, I swear. After a bit of hanging out, we started getting close when her cat suddenly began whining for a good 5 minutes. Then, we heard a loud thump, followed by even more cat noises. At that point, her parents had woken up. In a total panic, I grabbed my clothes and hid in her closet while she quickly threw on a shirt. Just as I closed the door, her dad walked in and sat down on her bed. I held my breath, thinking, okay, maybe I'm safe now. Peeking through the cracks of the door, I watch as her dad tells her they need to take the cat to the vet. Then, he notices my bright smiley face boxers lying right in the middle of the room. He stands up, picks them up, and looks at her with what I can only assume was a very suspicious expression. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel it. Now, my girlfriend has never been good at lying, especially to her parents. So instead of answering, she just glances toward the closet, right at me, then down at her lap, her cheeks turning bright red. That was all it took. Slowly, her dad turns toward the closet in the most terrifying way I've ever seen. He clears his throat and says, "All right, I know you're in there, and you're friggin' done for." Trying to keep what little dignity I had left, I take a deep breath, open the closet door, and look him right in the eyes. If I'm going down, I'm going down with honor. He stares at me for a long second, then says something I will never forget. He looks me up and down and asks, "Did you at least take precautions?" I say, "Yes, sir." He sighs. "Well, my cat just pooped and puked all over itself. We're going to the vet. I expect you to be gone when we get back, and don't plan on sleeping in tomorrow. Be here at 9 a.m. sharp to do some yard work. Have some decency, and for heaven's sake, use the door next time." Needless to say, we dated for 2 more years until I had to move out of state. We tried the whole long-distance relationship, and it just didn't work out. She's still one of my closest friends, and every time I end up in town, we fool around. We made a deal that if neither of us is married by 30, we'll just move in together and get married. Pretty sweet deal if you ask me, because she went from a 6'10" to a 10'10" model. Plus, her family still loves me to death, and I spend Thanksgiving with them instead of mine because mine are a bunch of a-holes. Story 13. I'm not sure I'm completely ashamed, but it was definitely one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. My girlfriend at the time was a bit older, and let's just say she liked to take charge. One night, her mom went next door for game night, so we had the house to ourselves, except for her little brother, who thankfully stayed in his room. She decided to get a little creative with the situation, and I was cool with it. This girl was nuts, though. She actually hurt me. Anyway, halfway through all this, we suddenly hear loud pounding on the door. Her mom's home early. Total panic. My girlfriend tries to fix things, but of course, everything's tangled and I'm not exactly helping. Her mom starts yelling from the hallway, demanding to know what's going on. Next thing we know, she actually forces the door open. I'm frozen, completely stuck, and she's just standing there, looking like she's about to call an exorcist. Meanwhile, my girlfriend runs off to grab scissors to free me, leaving me lying there like a deer in headlights, while her mom gives me the most intense lecture of my life. I couldn't even look up. I just stared at the wall, waiting for the universe to delete me. Eventually, I was freed and made the most awkward exit imaginable. We somehow stayed together for another 6 months, but I was permanently banned from that house. Honestly, that was probably for the best. Story 14. A few years ago, right after I turned 18, I moved in with my boyfriend. We had just unpacked and didn't feel like cooking, so of course we grabbed Taco Bell for dinner. We were beyond excited to finally have our own place. No parents, no siblings, no rules. Let's just say the evening got a little intense. After all that excitement, we passed out completely exhausted. About 10 minutes later, I woke us both up with the loudest Taco Bell-fueled surprise imaginable. It echoed through the room like a comedy sound effect straight out of a movie. My boyfriend jumped up in total shock while I was laughing so hard I could barely breathe. Every time I tried to stop, I'd laugh even more, making me unleash the rest of my thunderous gas. He swore that moment would haunt him forever, and honestly, I can't blame him. It took me a solid half hour to calm down. Story 15. I was 18 when I found myself at this small party in a rundown apartment in a rough part of the city. The place smelled heavily of cats and smoke. My 2 friends who came with me had already taken off, and my cat allergy was starting to get the better of me. Between the sneezing and the thick haze in the air, I just couldn't take it anymore. I left and found a nearby bar with a little patio. I ordered a coffee, lit a cigarette, and tried to relax. After a while, out of boredom more than anything else, I started browsing the personal section on Craigslist, just curious about who was out there. I sent a few messages, checked my email occasionally, and kept smoking as I waited to see if anyone interesting replied. I drove out to an office complex and parked. When I walked up to the address I'd been given, a man in his 30s opened the door. We exchanged a quick, "Hey," and he invited me in. The place looked like any ordinary office, bare walls, a few chairs, and the faint smell of stale coffee. I mentioned that I needed to use the restroom since I'd had too much caffeine, and he pointed me toward it. When I came back out, he told me to have a seat on a worn brown leather couch, so I did. He moved quickly, and before I could process what was happening, things had already turned more physical. For a moment, I froze, unsure how to react. The situation was intense, and I found myself caught between discomfort and curiosity. I leaned back on the couch, trying to stay in the moment as best I could. He told me not to warn him when things were close to ending. Apparently, he liked surprises. I just nodded, hoping everything would stay under control. When everything was over, I sat there for a moment, trying to make sense of what had just happened, but it wasn't over for him, and he kept going, a little too far. But I still stayed and reached the second finish line. It wasn't what I expected, and I suddenly felt the urge to leave. I excused myself, went to the bathroom to gather my thoughts, then got dressed. As I was heading out, I tried to thank him out of politeness, but he stopped me with a quick, "No, man, thank you." Outside, the night air felt sharp and grounding. I lit a cigarette in the car and drove aimlessly until I found a 24-hour donut shop. I sat there for hours, staring into my coffee and trying to untangle the mix of confusion and disbelief that had settled in. Story 16. After I graduated high school, I took a trip to Mexico. One night, I met a woman at a bar, and we ended up back at my hotel room. Things got intense quickly. And in the middle of it, she made a strange request that completely caught me off guard. At first, I thought I'd misheard her, but she repeated it, something that made me freeze in confusion. I didn't know what to do. I was young, inexperienced, and honestly a bit scared. I tried to laugh it off, but the moment had already turned uncomfortable. I did as I was told, and eventually she left, calling me a wuss, and I was left sitting there, wide awake, replaying everything in my head. After she left, stayed up all night, and waited for the federales to kick in my door and arrest me for essay. Story 17. My folks brought me furniture shopping once. I remember being curious about, well, a lot of things back then. The store was one of those giant warehouses that seemed to go on forever. At the very back, there were these amazing massage chairs. I managed to slip away from my parents and found this fancy brown Swedish massage chair that looked way too inviting. So, naturally, I had to give it a try. Everything was peaceful, until suddenly it felt like the entire store decided to wander over to the same section I was in. Now, nobody could really tell what was going on. Since I was lying face down, I probably just looked like a kid lying awkwardly on a vibrating couch. Like a startled rabbit, I froze as couple after couple wandered by, throwing me looks that could cut glass. They were probably thinking, what kind of parents let their kid just flop down on a display chair like that? I kept my eyes shut tight, pretending I was invisible, while the chair kept humming along. Then I heard my parents calling my name, wondering where I'd disappeared to. Just as my parents were getting closer, the situation reached a rather intense peak. I froze, completely panicked, realizing I was way too comfortable in that chair. My parents started calling my name, telling me to get up so we could leave, while I was just trying to act normal and not die of embarrassment. I quickly scrambled off the chair, straightened myself up, and tried to pretend nothing weird had happened. I must have looked completely suspicious, but honestly, no regrets. Story 18. When I was 18, I came home after a very long day. I just recently discovered how great having solo time was a few days before, and I was anxious to take care of business. So I rushed to my room, then stepped outside onto my balcony and started my smoking session. So I finish up and head to the door, only to realize it's locked. My parents are due home in about 40 minutes, and I'm standing there, totally spaced out, with my phone sitting safely inside where I can't reach it. So I can't even call my brother to come let me in. But I'm not going to let anything ruin this for me, so I sit down and do my thing. So there I was, on my balcony, completely out of it, realizing I've made a huge mistake. I'm locked out. Time is ticking before my parents get home and panic is setting in. I notice the mailman coming down the street and figure he's my only hope. I waved him over and asked if he can help me unlock the balcony door from inside. He comes up, but as soon as he steps in, my tiny bichon frise, Kirby, goes full Monty Python and the Holy Grail mode, charging at him like he's invading the castle. The poor guy's trying to fend off a 7-pound ball of fury while still unlocking the door. He manages to get it open and then sprints right out of the house. Story 19. I still remember how beautiful I thought she was when I first met her. I really liked her, but I kept my distance because she was in a relationship. And I didn't want to be that guy. Eventually, she became single, and we started talking online. One night, she came over to hang out, just to talk, listen to music, and relax. The night was fun, full of laughter, and a little too much Jägermeister. Things got flirty, and one thing led to another. It was passionate, real, and for a moment, it felt like something bigger. But the next morning, everything hit me hard. I was spiraling into a dark place in my life, and I knew I couldn't drag her into that, so I pulled away. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to hurt her more than I already had. So I responded to her text and told her I couldn't. I felt like crap, and rightly so. She opened up to me. She said she didn't want to be used. She trusted me, and honestly, was into me for more than physical attraction, and I, at least in her mind, used her. I betrayed my own values and her own trust. I became the very type of guy I hate. Marilyn, I'm so sorry. Story 20. At the ripe age of 21, I got unnecessarily drunk at a party. Some guy challenged me to go shot for shot with Canadian Mist, and I didn't realize he was supposedly setting his own shots aside, rotating them around like fresh ones. We made it to about 9 shots before the inevitable happened, a full-blown vomit fest in my friend's bathroom. After rinsing with mouthwash, I staggered into his room only to find his girlfriend with another girl while he stood there watching. So I stood there watching too. It wasn't exactly pleasant. I remember wincing a few times until she finally looked at me and said, "Are you just going to stand there? Do something?" I glanced over at my friend, and he gave me this mustacheless creeper smile with a kind of half nod and shrug. I took the hint, joined in, and that was that. In a horrifying moment of self-realization, I completely froze. Nothing was working, mentally or physically. She didn't seem to notice, thankfully, and the moment just sort of carried on in its own weird way. Meanwhile, my brain was spiraling. My friend and his girlfriend were still in the room, and I could practically feel their secondhand embarrassment radiating through the air. Eventually, they excused themselves, probably unable to handle the awkwardness any longer. When it was all said and done, I just flopped down next to her, staring at the ceiling, grateful that it was finally over. A few minutes later, she was curled up on her side, facing away from me, and I started to drift off, ready to let the night finally end. But then, out of nowhere, I felt something warm trickling down my leg. She had made a mess. I was in such shock and disbelief that I simply let it happen. Once it was all over and I realized this wasn't some strange dream, I got up and tried to piece the night back together. I helped her get dressed, made the bed, and carried her to the couch before passing out next to her. The next morning, she wakes up, sits up groggily, looks down, and asks, "Wait, whose clothes am I wearing?" In the ultimate cherry on top, BS of all BS, 9 months later, she gave birth to my twins. Story 21. When I was 18, I went on a road trip with my first girlfriend, who was 19 at the time. We traveled with her family from Shakopee, Minnesota to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan for a skiing and snowboarding trip. I think we stayed at the Indian Head Resort. Her family had rented a big, full-sized van with 3 full rows of seats. It was her mom and stepdad, her little sister, who was around 10, my girlfriend, and me. Her family was pretty comfortable with me. We went to the same church, and I'd been dating their daughter for almost 2 years, so it wasn't a big deal that she and I were sitting alone in the 3rd row. We'd been on the road all day and were about an hour from our destination. It was dark out, probably around 10 at night, when my ex-girlfriend grabbed a sweatshirt, balled it up as a pillow, and rested her head on my lap as if she were about to take a nap. And well, things escalated a little. There was no way anyone could have seen anything. Her sister was asleep in the row ahead of us. Her mom was awake but sitting up front, and her stepdad was focused on driving. It was dark outside, and even if it had been daylight, no one would have been able to see us from the rearview mirror. Besides, like I said, her family trusted me, so no one would have suspected a thing. So we continued for a good 15-20 minutes. It was the single most bizarre thing I've ever done. But on the other hand, I keep making eye contact with her stepdad, and I can hear a conversation that her mom is having with him about God knows what. Anyways, everything went better than expected. There's no embarrassing ending here. Her parents never caught us or anything, but I've always felt very ashamed that while her parents were treating me to a nice skiing vacation, something else was going on in the back seat. I still think about the whole situation in detail since it was extremely hot, but I can still see her stepdad's eyes in the rearview mirror, glowing from the other car's headlights, staring straight at my soul. Good times. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.